Okay. All right. So, what's happening in Iran? Well, we had a presidential election, mainly between two candidates. You have on the conservative side of the equation, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, running for re-election. He was elected in 2005 in an election that only 60% of the population turned out for. Anyone who was of the reformist stripe boycotted the 2005 elections because many of their candidates were barred from taking part by the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Yes?
What's the color? I mean, what's the deal with the colors?
Green. Mir Hossein Mousavi's campaign chose the color green as its color.
Why do they choose colors? What's the point?
Well, the color
Is
green
it like the donkey, or
the color green is very significant in Islam. It was alleged to be the Prophet's favorite color, and it has always been associated with Islam going way, way back. And so they chose the color green. I have Ahmadinejad in red because he's evil. On the side with Mir Hossein Mousavi, he had in his corner two former presidents, two former moderate to reformist presidents. Ali Rafsanjani was president in 1989 to 97, and then Mohammad Khatami, who was president before Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. It seems that the supreme leader, Khamenei, is on Ahmadinejad's side. There have only been two supreme leaders in Iraq, in Iran. There was Khomeini from 1979 until his death in 1989, and since 1989, now for 20 years, it's been Khamenei. Kind of confusing, they basically just switched the letter out, but it's a different guy. In terms of some numbers, demographically, Iran is a fascinating place. 70% of their population is under age 30. There was a huge baby boom after the revolution. Mousavi's campaign was built upon a youth vote, not unlike the Obama campaign last year. Because you have such a huge, huge number of people between 18, which is the voting age, and 30, a lot of polls, there weren't nearly the number of polls that we have in this country leading up to an election, had Mousavi comfortably ahead, 54-35, 54-38 of Ahmadinejad. But that's not what the final numbers showed. Something like 85% of the total electorate came out on June 12th to vote. 46 million eligible, 40 million turned out. Anybody know what our turnout was in the presidential election? It was like 61, 62, and we were all thrilled about it. Like, oh, democracy's back. 85% turnout. The expectation was that Mousavi was going to win, or at the very least, force a runoff on June 19th between the top two candidates. No candidate gets 50%. The top two candidates then go into a runoff. You had actually 4 candidates running. What we're going to see now is a report done right before the election by, I think, not the BBC, it's on Channel 4. Hang on a second, what do I have to call him? This all discombobulated.
We want freedom of speech. When a professor expresses an opinion, he shouldn't be afraid of being sanctioned. When a journalist writes, he shouldn't fear being imprisoned.
Ahmadinejad bodies also told these calls. His supporters appreciate his anti-corruption policies and were able to give up the supplementary research program to fund international projects. For them, it's a question of national pride.
He's a courageous, big man. His accent, he didn't just words. He thinks about other people, about his franchise, not about his own interests.
Ahmadinejad's policy remained targeted towards the poor, established with the middle dotted bars. He's backed by the cornerstone of President Mohammed Khatami, who had huge support among voters. But in a country where 6 Iranians out of 10 are under 30, that's crucial.
Mr. Bir Hossein Mousavi tries to give and send two kind of signals. Some of them faces to the requirements and the needs of the teenage people about the liberty, and some of them is slogans to the black people that are older, for example, about the justice, about the jobs and other things.
And they are voting for the right of Ahmadinejad to take.
Oh, you can't hear what the hell she's saying. It's not important. Right. Sorry, I kind of threw this together late last night. What's on the screen now is some campaign ads for Mousavi. He really utilized the internet in a way that no other presidential candidate had done in Iranian elections. Facebook events, Twitter, whole 9 yards. And though the youth had been disillusioned in 2005, hadn't come out, hadn't voted, they were coming out in enormous numbers here for Mousavi. Mousavi was prime minister during the 1980s, one of the revolutionaries, and promised to open the country up, to roll back the crackdown of Ahmadinejad. This is a very catchy song. I like this song. This is an interesting ad too, because Khomeini, the Ayatollah Khomeini, the father of the revolution, is figured prominently in this. Kind of playing a revisionist history game, arguing that the repressiveness in Iran right now is not intended by the supreme leader, Khomeini, at the beginning, that the revolution was about freedom from the tyranny of the Shah, freedom for Islam in a country that where Islam had been put in the back seat by the Shah and his westernizing program. Under Ahmadinejad, well, I don't want to talk over the Farsi song, but I will. Under Ahmadinejad, the reforms, the opening of society that was witnessed, especially under Mohammed Khatami, was just completely and totally rolled back in no uncertain terms, so that Iran circa today looks a lot more like Iran during the bad old days of the 80s than it does anything that came before. And a lot of the supporters of Mousavi don't necessarily remember the 80s, but they remember the 90s, and they remember Khatami, and they remember how much more open society was before Ahmadinejad. And all of these people who had boycotted in 2005, allowing Ahmadinejad to barely win, he had to go to a runoff election.